Moikka ja tervetuloa. This service project is dedicated to Frazer and Denvor, my best friends of 17 years and fellow travelers who left their last scent, breath and paw prints in the wild rose country of Alberta. We co-discovered the Frazer School of Boundless Joy, which is a fictional story focused on the northern Canadian Cordillera. Note that everything herein is imaginary, with some dangling facts. Hope you enjoy the show. Two years ago, two kind Canadian souls, much indebted, Cara and Anthony Mayne, helped me and my two best friends start my long-awaited journey to the Yukon. We landed at Edmonton International Airport, hoping that the end of spring would bring us to Prince George and eventually lead us to the Yukon. But I could not find a pet-friendly apartment for medium-sized dogs. Not in British Columbia, and absolutely nothing in the Yukon. If you rent in Canada, you probably know about the 25-pound limit. But all you need is one yes. And we got one in Edmonton, and then another in St. Albert, and then another in Fort Nelson, and yet another in Longueuil, Québec. If you keep knocking, someone will open that door for you. Frazer, one of my dogs, was so content with all the loving seniors in St. Albert that he chose to rest there in peace. Denvor, my other dog, and I were blessed many times over to meet kind Canadian souls pretty much everywhere we went. No French, no job. That was a reality check in Quebec, but the locals here are just as kind and supportive as anywhere else in Canada. I'm glad that I could improve my ability to understand technical content in French, which is a big plus for me. And I'm also glad that I can finally return home after 2 years. Actually a year, because I spent 6 months in Fort Nelson and 6 months in Longueuil, Quebec. I can now return back home to my wild rose country. Our Canadian journey started in Edmonton, and it took us to northern BC and Quebec. We had a memorable 5,300 kilometer road trip from northeastern BC to Quebec with Denvor still alive and Frazer's ashes. And that road trip was repeated yet again when we moved back to Alberta from Quebec. So Denvor and I came back to Alberta, but to Calgary this time, to say hello to old friends and make some new ones. Frazer lived a good 16 years, which isn't too bad for a medium-sized dog. Denvor made it back home safely after a close call on September 30th. We are hoping that he is alive, or he chooses to stay alive, to celebrate his 16th birthday in a few days on the 24th of October. And I guess he will eventually rest with his brother in Alberta. As for the Yukon, which is my dream of about 27 years now, I'm happy so far writing a fictional story about its geology. We haven't gotten to the Yukon yet, but we most likely are settling in Alberta, so any Yukon trip will most likely not be a relocation trip, but it will be a good time, hopefully sometime in the future, to see the place that I'm writing about, because for now it's just a fictional story based on what I'm reading. There is this hope that my 27-year long-awaited journey would eventually come to an end, and unfortunately not with my dogs, but their ashes. I might most definitely see the Yukon in a couple of years, if not next year. But why am I sharing this? It's because I am resurrecting this first podcast, Arctic HOWLs, which was paused indefinitely after the passing of my best friend, Frazer. The initial purpose of this podcast was to capture the essence of the Arctic habitat of wildlife and locals, which is what HOWLs stands for. And that was with a focus on Arctic Canada and Finland. So I was supposed to write a book with 2 volumes, one volume on Arctic Canada and the other on Arctic Finland. After Frazer passed away last September, this podcast was paused indefinitely. So now this podcast is part of my ongoing tribute to to Frazer's ubiquitous presence. And this includes this website, Travel Curators, that is like a service project that I started in honor of Frazer. It includes the fictional story that I'm writing about the geology of the Yukon, but it circles around a school called the Frazer School of Boundless Joy. And the school is headquartered in Finland. And this podcast is also going to talk about the first audiobook that I'm going to attempt to publish. It's not going to happen anytime soon though, because it's going to be the first series on the chosen rock. Since this is a geology focused podcast now, I wouldn't say it's completely geology focused, it's more about the fictional story, but the geology is the core element in there. We might have some dash of SAR, because one of our geologists, Yalo Monivilia, will walk you through some things related to SAR and INSAR, but mainly to do with eclogites, obviously, which is the chosen rock, but also to do with mineral alteration mapping, digital elevation models, and other things related to carbonation. So interferometric SAR might come up, but it won't be the centerpiece of this podcast. And finally, anything that includes or rather involves a backstory, any future endeavors that are related to giving benign tokens, will be covered in this podcast. So The Chosen Rock, which is the first audiobook, will be published on my current podcast, which is Sartastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, which would be season 3. I'm not expecting it to come out anytime soon because there is a ton of reading that needs to be done to come out with an audiobook, and the fictional story needs to be fleshed out a bit more. But this podcast will actually cover the backstories now. So it will cover Arctic Canada, Arctic Finland, but the initial purpose, which is about interviewing people, is not going to happen anymore. And it's not going to be about the 2 volumes that I was supposed to write about the Arctic habitat of wildlife and locals. It will include things which do cover some of the wildlife, primarily wolves, but it's going to be in a fictional setup. And I already mentioned one of the main characters in my story is Yalo Monivilia. I will have another episode that is dedicated to Yalo Monivilia and also talk about who inspired this character. And the other character is Aranya Susi Petonen. So if you've read any of my posts on LinkedIn, or if you've gone through my website, travelcurators.com, you probably know who Aranya Susi Petonen is, but I will have a special blog post on her as well, because Yalo and Aranya are the main characters of this fictional story. That's the reason I am recording this, is because I hope it's a short recording, probably not. But I'm recording this because the first series is The Chosen Rock, and this podcast is Resurrected, but it will just be an informal backstory related podcast now. And since I am the, not self-proclaimed, I was given this title by a couple of my ex-colleagues. So since I am the Queen of Tangents, I will use this podcast, or rather continue to use this podcast, to go on a tangent, go on many tangents, and go on many more life-enriching tangents is what I like to say now. And this podcast and every effort that I've been involved in since the passing of Frazer is dedicated to my best friend Frazer. And I also want to say thank you to one very special singer, because her songs helped me grieve the loss of Frazer. So thank you, Kate Wolf.
Take the back roads home through the open countryside, letting things slip by, drawn out time. Take the long way home on the back roads of this life, taking time to see what goes by. Coming and going, there's no dividing line. What you're heading for, someone left behind. And the shortest road ain't always the best. Sometime let a back road take you home.
which is also why you will hear snippets of her songs in pretty much all new episodes. And I am much indebted to her son, Max Wolf, for permitting the use of her songs in my podcast. Some of my favorite songs are Unfinished Life, Streets of Calgary, Pacheco, Red Tail Hawk, September Song, which is a really nice song, and considering September is an important month for me, Who Knows, Amazed to Find, Across the Great Divide, Old Jerome, another great song, and Backroads. These were on an unending loop since the day Frazer left, but his favorite song was The Trumpet Whine. His tail never stopped wagging and his eyes never blinked when I sang, or rather croaked, this particular song. And I'm sure that Kate's songs have brought comfort to many who have lost their most beloved. So I would always like to dedicate 2 of her songs to anybody on the first leg of their journey from sorrow to strength. So the songs are Legend in His Time, a 1975 song, and the second one is The Wind Blows Wild, a 1986 song. I need to start diving into certain things that I mentioned here. I spoke about Frazer's ubiquitous presence. I spoke about the Frazer School of Boundless Joy. I spoke about an audiobook on the Chosen Rock. And I also said something about giving benign tokens. So if you visit my website, travelcurators.com, travel curators is one word, I talk about giving benign tokens. Now, a benign token is an effortless contribution by me that inspires you enough to donate $9 in cash or kind to any organization in your neighborhood that is serving a cause that matters the most to you. If you took any action as a result of this podcast or as a result of my post, then thank you for celebrating the ubiquitous presence of the one you love the most. And that is all about giving benign tokens. This effort, Travel Curators, phrased in, is my benign token, and it shows my appreciation for life-enriching tangents, and it also wants to articulate the ubiquitous presence of my best friend Frazer, who returned to the all-encompassing energy in September 2023. Anyway, so my contribution is definitely any content on this website, travelcurators.com. And if it has a benign tokens tag, that is to inspire you to give a benign token, which could be $9 in cash, or it could be an effort in kind. It's also another contribution is the fictional story of the Frazer School of Boundless Joy, which is on my podcast, some portions of it, that is Sarcastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Then something that I want to offer, but it's only a service that is available at the moment to my friends and colleagues and to their close connections. It's a free clarity call of 30 minutes to see if I can help you re-engage in a professional setting after a life-altering experience. It's a service that is not tied to anything paid at all. It's just a service I wanted to offer in memory of Frazer. And the only catch is if I don't know you, someone I trust must vouch for you. Post that if I really can help you after that clarity call. I am willing to also offer another few calls. One is a free resilience call of 30 minutes and the other is a stewardship call. That is to help you bounce back and to re-engage in a professional setting. But the stewardship call is mainly to help you redirect your energy, the pain that you have, convert it and transform it into something and create a service project like the one that I have, Travel Curators, in honor of the person you lost. So that it gives you a channel where you can dedicate your, I wouldn't say it's a channel to, it's not something to channelize your energy. It's just a way to say thank you for the time that you had with the person you love the most. You can never fill the vacuum, but a way to deal with it. It's a tribute, but it's a live tribute, so it's a living tribute, and that's why I wanted to call it a service project, and that's what the stewardship call is for. It's not for everybody, so if you're fine with not wanting a service project in honor of the person you lost, then definitely this call is not for you. But if you are someone like me, I wanted some outlet, and Travel Curators made the best sense for me, including the things I just spoke about, the fictional story and the audiobook. So that's all a service tribute to honor my best friend Frazer, and if that's something you want to do, something similar, whatever is a service project in your mind, if that's something you want to do, I would like to offer my assistance. But like I mentioned before, it's a service right now available only to my friends and colleagues and to their very close connections. So if I don't know you, someone I trust must vouch for you. That's about it for this episode, and I want to take some time to think through. Want it to be a tribute to Frazer, but also something that still continues to express my love for the Yukon and the Canadian wilderness. I think that's about it. I will leave you now and say, as the Finns say, moi moi. The intro and outro music is by Cooper Moore, courtesy of Free Music Archive.